Aloha, I'm Jack Dugan with Pacific Media Group and Big Island Now. Today we have Hawaii County Mayor Mitch Roth addressing some of the pressing issues facing Hawaii County. Aloha, Mayor Roth, thank you so much for joining us today. First of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you guys doing today?
Oh, we're doing good, staying busy. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you answering some, maybe tough questions regarding things that are going on in Hawaii County. So we really appreciate your time and you speaking to these things. So we'll start off with the current status of Hawaii County. It's been more than a year since the effects of the pandemic hit us and hit us really hard. We've had some great milestones achieved over this last period of time, but as we're all well aware, there's been some major setbacks as well. What would you say are the greatest challenges facing Hawaii County today in from what you're seeing?
Boy, there's so many different places I can go here. Having run for office, I thought the biggest challenges back last year would be creating jobs. And, one of the biggest things I see right now with, COVID is a big challenge. But trying to get people to work in the jobs. We have an employment shortage. There's a lot of hotels, restaurants, and others trying to find employees. So we have lots of jobs, just not enough employees. As we're looking at COVID, one of the issues right now we're having is finding people to do the testing, and so that's another set of employees. For county employees, there's some challenges in finding those employees. I think in general for the county, I think one of the bigger challenges that I didn't really understand as much when I was running as I do now is how much need there is for our infrastructure and how expensive that those infrastructural needs are, whether we're talking about roads and bridges or our wastewater system and our solid waste systems. Each of those we're looking at billions, $1 billion about. So we're talking about billions of dollars of needs for infrastructure to bring them up to, a decent standard. Of course, our annual budget's about $600 million, with 70% of that going to employees. So it's not an easy need to fix your infrastructure, your roads, your bridges, and those wastewater things, our buses, and finding different solutions to those has been challenges. But we're finding solutions to those challenges, and it's kind of exciting.
Gotcha. Thank you for all that. And I know we've been reporting on some of the health related issues with COVID and the hospitals. From ICU beds filling up or hospital beds filling up to staffing shortages. And is there anything you'd like to highlight of those issues that are currently facing the county?
Well, it's very timely. I visited the Hilo Hospital yesterday, and I visited the Kona Hospital today. And what I saw was emergency rooms that are very busy. I think Kona said they would normally have like 50 people in a day. They're up to 70 people in a day. And same thing with Hilo, that the numbers that they're seeing are really huge numbers. Hilo told me that they had people having to spend the night and up to 2 days in the ER because there was no space in the ICUs. The ICUs in Hilo, it was completely filled yesterday. They have 11 beds there. 6 of them were taken up by COVID patients. On the Kona side, they have 9 beds. 5 of those beds, I believe, were taken up by COVID patients today when we went down there. What's really frustrating in talking to the employees there is that this is completely a solvable problem. 95% of the people in our hospitals to 97% are unvaccinated. In Kona, every single person in the hospital was unvaccinated. And in Hilo, it's like most of the people, everybody in ICU for sure was unvaccinated. And those others in their COVID ward, which they have 18 beds. They had 21 people waiting for 18 beds. Most of those people were unvaccinated. And so it's something that is a solvable problem. We know as a community that if we wear our mask, we distance, we put pauses on things, we don't, have the big parties and things like that, we could actually get this under control. And, the Big Island was under control until the Delta variant, hit us. But we're not special. Over 90% of the counties in America are going through the same problem that we're having right now. And that problem is just so many cases, and it's just overwhelming the systems. On the Kona side, you asked about personnel. We just got 36 female workers, which are mostly nurses that are helping out with the demand on personnel and staffing at our hospitals. We're very lucky to get them, but even for staffing with female workers, one of the big problems that we have is housing those people and finding rental cars for those people and doing things that we're having great shortages on our island.
Thank you for all that you just shared. I think it's really helpful for people to hear, especially the detail with the hospitals and just kind of the state of the union, if you will, with the healthcare system. Yeah. Moving on to the next subject, tourism and resource management. So tourism came to an abrupt standstill, and that was a very interesting dynamic, right? And then it's pretty, I think, safe to say that it's back in full effect. But of course, things aren't back to normal. We're aware of some issues, as you noted too, rental cars and different things like that. What is the county involved in as far as potentially trying to help solve some of those issues related to tourism and just managing our resources, local beaches, just all of that?
It's kind of interesting. What we've been doing is we've been having a lot of conversations with our hospitality industry. We recently just finished our destination management action plan, talking about how we can have a better product, how we can be a little bit more culturally sensitive. And so we've been working a lot with our hospitality industry, and I can tell you they're having some pretty interesting issues. Recently, talking to one of the hotels, they told us that they're stopping taking reservations while COVID is going on. And the reason why they're putting a stop or putting kind of a freeze on some of their reservations is that there's not enough people working in their restaurants to take the full load. So if your restaurants are only working at half mass, then it makes it difficult to give our visitors a quality experience. Rental cars are another huge issue. I was riding over with one of my employees today, and he actually came up to my house. His wife dropped him off, and I was asking him about his car. He's loaning his car to his brother-in-law because his brother-in-law is renting his car out on one of these websites, and I guess he's earning like $150 a day, and he's had his car rented out for the last couple of months. He was telling me. Wow. Kind of amazing to see what's happening. So there's definitely a rental car shortage, which makes it a little bit difficult. On the Big Island, we have something that makes our tourism a little bit unique. The majority of the hotels on the Big Island are all upper scale resorts. And so it's a different quality of tourist, or just, people who have a lot more money than what you'd see necessarily in Waikiki or, in some of the places in Maui. So we have more of an upscale market, and that made things a lot easier for us. The resorts, they generally have their own little communities where, they're sticking closer to the resorts than going out and on the streets. So it's a little bit different than what you see in Waikiki, and that's actually benefited us quite a bit.
Okay.
But they're feeling the pinch, and now with COVID, it's making it a little bit more difficult for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for all that. And I know, some of the other counties, to our knowledge and understanding, have been looking at changing parking related, issues with, for example, local Kama'aina residents having trouble finding parking when they want to go to the beach or things like that. Are you seeing much of that? And if so, is the county, on the county level, are you guys exploring any sort of, paid parking for visitors to help alleviate some of the, just issues that the Kama'aina are facing?
So not as much as you see on the other islands, although part of our DMAP, or our Destination Management Action Plan, which was entered into with the tourism, Hawaii Tourism Association and Hawaii Convention Visitor Bureau and the others in the hospitality industry, they've been looking at things like that. One of the ideas that they're talking about is kind of like what you do with fishing areas, where you kind of have a pause in those areas. So they're looking at putting a pause on going into certain places, for example, like Waipio Valley, having seasonal locations where they're going to use those locations, and then they're going to put them off the map. So parking is another smaller issue, but it's a smaller issue on this island than it is, for example, in Maui, where you have all the tourists going to the same place.
Right.
Luckily, we have a very big island with a lot of different attractions and a lot of different possibilities.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense. Thanks for that. Okay, moving on into the discussion of employment. And, I know you noted it a moment ago that it is a real issue on Big Island. So, are there any things the county can do and is doing to help try to alleviate some of these employment related issues?
We're in a whole bunch of different conversations with different people and different industries, and trying to, help out in where we can. The issue is a lot of times we're talking about private businesses and people, and I don't see a lot where the county itself is going to be lifting the load. It's more all of us working together with our chambers of commerce and others, trying to find those solutions, and that's what we've been doing. Where we can help, we have, but more that's more of a private industry, and trying to get people back to work is a more interesting issue. A lot of the things that people talk about when we have these discussions have to do with maybe some of the state laws, and so we may be advocating in some of those areas as well.
Gotcha. So I guess, correct me if this is a wrong assessment. It's a real issue, as you are very well aware of, but the county may be a little limited, as you see it, to be able to help solve some of the issues, and it's really more to do with the private industry and the private sector for it to kind of figure itself out.
Yeah, and some of it is government. One of the biggest issues that we're seeing is, kids being at home, and now as people are going back to work, you're seeing that families don't have to be home with their kids. But even that's changing, with what's happening with the Delta variant. We may have to bring people back home and bring schooling back home. And so that's been one of the big challenges. How you deal with those kinds of things. There's so many different reasons why people are staying at home. Some of the reasons may be that, and I've heard people say, getting unemployment. I earn more unemployment than I do at my restaurant job, because I don't even have as many customers coming in, as many diners giving tips, and so they live on tips. So some of that's a choice. Some of it is watching kids at home. And some of it, people are saying, I don't want to be part of the workforce anymore. And just, it's easier just retiring. Now's a good time.
Yeah, we've heard some in from local businesses that we've talked to, as well as some of the other government officials, where the unemployment, there's been some cases where it's maybe disincentivized people to get back to work, as I think you're kind of noting. Is there anything that on the county level that you guys are looking at or are working on to try to resolve that, if there's a way to do that?
So I know that our research and development department is looking at. I'm trying to think of what the correct word here is. Where again, more making sure that there's, I don't want to say gender equality, but there's some kind of equality in jobs and how you get people back. If it is allowing for things like working remotely. But, a lot of the industries that we're seeing, like the restaurants, you can't work remotely. And so they're looking at some different ideas in that area. Okay,
I appreciate that. Okay, we'll move on to the last subject. So, and it's a big one. It's real estate for Kama'aina specifically, talking about real estate and affordability and the ability for Kama'aina to be able to purchase their, whether it's their first home or just be able to purchase a home they're looking to purchase, with some of the things that have gone with prices, right? And also just affordable housing in general, even rentals. I know you mentioned with some of the, I think they're traveling nurses, or at least nurses that are coming in new, having issues with finding housing. How would you describe the dynamic? And are there any things that the county can or is doing to help solve these issues?
Yeah, so this is a big thing that we've been really focusing on in this administration. We realize that we have a shortage of probably like 5,000 to 10,000 housing units that we need to put up before 2025. There's a study that came out that talked about that. We've been looking at that, and I like to kind of switch topics a little bit here. What our big focus has been is on sustainability. And for me, what sustainability has meant was making sure that our kids can raise their kids here on this island, and their kids can raise their kids. In order for that to happen, we have to have a couple of things in place. One is quality jobs, and the other is affordable housing. And if we don't have both of those, then it makes it very difficult for us to have a sustainable Hawaii where our kids are raising their kids here. And so we've been looking at both of those things together. How do we make sure that we have quality jobs? Quality jobs of the future are things in the STEM industry: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Those are the jobs that make a lot of money, that allow our kids to, get those great positions. And so we've been looking at that and trying to marry that up with, affordable housing, so that they can actually work and live here and do some of those jobs that they do on the mainland. My son, for example, works for NASA. This whole year, he's been working from a computer at his place. Right now, that's in LA, but we can have those kind of jobs where they're doing those things, working for their homes. That'd be great. And so, looking at the housing situation, we determined that there were some things that were really problematic. One was, if you're a young family and you're building a house, going through the permitting process takes a lot of time. And so we wanted to clean up the permitting process. We just launched a new permitting system called EPIC, which is an electronic permitting information center. So in the past, you would drop your permits off to the building department. The building department would look at it, then would send it on to the planning department, then would send it on to the fire department, then to another department. So every department would have to wait until the other department was finished. And if you had one guy who was taking a vacation, that may, slow things down considerably. With the Epic system, you electronically process your permits, and every department has the opportunity of seeing those permits at the same time. And so that's one way of clearing that up. Second problem that we saw was the way the permits were being interpreted, or the way the law was being interpreted, was very random. And so we started saying, look, we want you to interpret the permits by the law, not by some of these department memos that were going on for years. And so we found out that planning department had memos that were in place for about 20 years, but the public couldn't see them necessarily. It wasn't on any computer, not any books. And so you're kind of guessing, and people would interpret those differently. And so we said, no, we're going to interpret things the way it's written in the ordinances. And so we got rid of all of the planning director memos from the past and started everybody on the same line. And so that's been helping. The other thing that we saw was when you're trying to build bigger projects, there was a lot of confusion for developers. And so we'd have departments working in silos. They weren't communicating with each other. And so you'd go to one department and they'd give you something different. Now what we're doing is we're trying to get those department heads working together, talking together to the different groups, and finding out what the problems are up front, so those bigger projects can move through a lot quicker. And so we've been doing that, and it's actually been working out pretty well. While we're doing that, and I have to say this because there's a lot of people that are just totally anti-development because they want to preserve Hawaii. We've also been trying to make sure that as we develop the Big Island, we're not becoming a Honolulu or some mega center. We want to keep the Big Island, and keep what we have here. And so we've been working on these things, but trying to work together as a team versus working in silos, and that's really been making a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate all that. As you acknowledged at the beginning, it's a big subject, and one that's not easy to fix. But it sounds like there's a bit going on. What, the best you can answer this, if you could project into the future some sort of timeline that maybe some of these, because they sound like some new initiatives, if I understood you correctly, that are being put in place and taking effect. When do you think it might start to move the needle, if you will, as far as with some of these real estate affordability housing issues?
So it's actually a really good question. We've had a lot of projects that were stuck in place, and we were able to unstuck them, get them moving. So we actually have some projects that actually started and stopped like 4 years ago because of some issues, and we're able to go in there and figure out what was going on and get them moving. Mm-hmm. So we've had a couple of those already. So in respect, some of that's actually happening. We met with some people, just before this meeting, and they were talking about a different way of building, using like a styrofoam product that's a lot cheaper and a lot more solid. And so, that's just one example. Yeah. But generally for these bigger projects, they take years to move. We have another project that started like 10 years ago, Kamako Inui, which is in Waikoloa. And that project, we built 91 houses already. We have another 1,000 houses that can be built. And so we're looking at getting that going. So the needle to move it is going to take a huge push. But we're starting to make progress today.
Gotcha. Thanks for all that. Now, talking about, let's say that those 1,000 units that you're just referencing that are going to be coming online on some time frame. Hawaii's got a global demand in a lot of ways, at least a very national demand, right? Where we see folks either moving here or oftentimes buying a vacation home or a home they may have just as an investment. Is there anything that can be done or that's being explored as far as trying to help and maybe it's not possible, but is there anything that the county is maybe looking at to just try to help make sure that the local kama'aina, the local families, as you talked about sustainability, are able to best have a shot at home ownership?
Absolutely, and that project Kamakoi Nui is one of those projects where we have the land, we're working with developers, and that's I don't want to say low income, but it's affordable housing is what we're looking at. And so we have several of those projects that we're working on. We're also looking at revisiting our short-term vacation rental laws, because I think what's in place now makes it very difficult with, for if all of the inventory is being bought up for vacation rentals, it makes it difficult for our local people, our local families to afford housing. And so we're looking at revisiting those short-term vacation rental laws and make sure that if you're going to have a short-term vacation rental, for example, it's not in a regular community, make it in a resort community. And making it in a place where it's not taking homes from local families.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, thank you for all that. Well, that concludes our topics and questions. We covered a lot. Appreciate your time and your answers that you provided. Is there anything else you'd like to add or comment before we conclude?
I know never to answer this question, but the other thing we're looking at, I was just thinking about it after we just said that, is ohana housing. We've kind of prevented ohana housing in the past, but we have some areas that they can have a second house, an ohana house for other family members. We saw that in Puna, for example, when the lava flow started taking houses away and people wanted to bring their family members in. So that may be something else. But other than that, I think that's about it. Thank you guys so much for doing this interview.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, Mayor. Good luck to you. I know you got your hands full, and we'll see you soon.